I'm Marshall Hay. I'm a graduate student at Kansas State University in agronomy studying weed science under Dallas Peterson. I think there are really three different things that producers were interested in when coming to the Sorghum U today, especially with weed management. One was, how do we use our cultural practices, things like cover crops and row spacing, to manage our weeds, as well as how herbicide resistance works. There's a lot of uncertainty and questions and quite frankly some misnomers out there about herbicide resistance. That would be kind of the second thing I think a lot of folks were interested in coming here today. And then the last part was really how to develop a management plan. And that's something that I talked a lot about, was going into 2018 here with our grain sorghum, talking about driver weeds such as pigweed. We need to have a plan out there with our weed management, and that's something that I try to share with the producers today. How to use our cultural practices, how to understand resistance, and how to kind of use those things together to develop a management plan using herbicides and those other tools to manage pigweed. Sure, so a lot of producers might have that misnomer that herbicides create herbicide resistance, and it's actually the exact opposite. We create herbicide resistance by using the herbicide inappropriately. Herbicides don't cause mutations. The herbicide resistance is always linked to a genetic characteristic, a genetic trait, one or multiple genes that convey that resistance. I might liken it to an Olympic athlete that can swim very well, or that NFL football player that has a strong arm and a good eye and that innate ability. Some weeds have that innate ability to survive a given dose of herbicide that formerly controlled other generations. When we think about what the producers might be talking about, where we have a poor control out in the field, maybe it's because the leaf of the plant had some dust sitting on it and the weed wasn't controlled because it couldn't absorb the herbicide. That's not the herbicide's fault. If we looked at the level of or tolerance, what it took to kill that weed that had dust sitting on it, and then what it would take to control its progeny, it would be the exact same. It wouldn't have changed because we didn't control it with that herbicide. I also used the example of a paraquat application in pigweed, where maybe the producer has a pigweed out there that we burned it down completely in a fallow situation, but there's that one shoot coming out at the bottom. People might think that that's causing herbicide resistance, but it's not. In that situation, we just had poor control. We didn't get good coverage with the contact type herbicide that paraquat is, and we're probably spraying it when it was too big. So in that situation, its progeny are going to be just as susceptible to the paraquat as it was. We just need to do a better job of using the herbicide in a more timely way. Now, some people might bring up the idea of low-dose selection for herbicide resistance. That is a real thing that does happen. But for the majority of our cropping systems and for the recommendations that our producers are thinking about, that's not necessarily at the forefront of that discussion. It's more about using that repeated selection from year to year to select for those biotypes that have the genes that can confer that resistance genetically. I think there's just a lot of excitement around that I think is exciting to hear the questions about, is using integrated strategies. Things such as using narrower row spacings or incorporating a cover crop to produce more residue into the system. I think that's exciting. Yeah, the producers are really interested in trying to maximize those herbicide applications, but how do we somehow use those cultural practices to develop an integrated strategy for moving forward? That's something that we've talked about for a long time in weed science, and sometimes in academia we can get trapped in our silo and it's hard to work outside of that. But hearing these producers' questions about those kind of integrated strategies is really exciting, because that means that they are listening and they are wanting to figure out how to bring that into their cropping system. I think it's a dynamic thing that, not a silver bullet you might say, but definitely could be a piece to the management strategy. To say what the long-term implications are from going out of a no-till system into a full-blown conventional tillage system, I think that's pretty dramatic. But when we go to look at using an infrequent tillage system or tillage paths to control that mess that happened out there because things didn't get activated or what have you, I'm not sure what the long-term consequences of that might be. I don't think that there are big short-term consequences, but that's just a really difficult thing to think about. From an integrated aspect, I like the idea of using tillage to control weeds because it's something different than herbicides, which is a good idea. But then we also have to expand beyond that to understand what kind of ramifications are there for soil loss, soil erosion, and how that changes the soil structure because we've been in that no-till system for so long. So it's really a difficult question, but again, it's exciting that producers are thinking about different ways other than just herbicides, not to throw herbicides under the bus, but things in addition to help manage the risk of herbicide resistance.